Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the views, and I'm surprised how many people hold them and how widespread these views are, but how the murdering and assassinating of someone merely on the basis you disagree with them politically is acceptable. You rejoice in their death. You celebrate it. It's something that you wished for, and you want to go online and publicly declare, "Gee, I'm glad Billy Bob or Jimmy Jack or someone got murdered or assassinated. They have views I don't agree with. It is therefore quite acceptable to murder them." I mean, like, wow. How did we get to this? There was a time when murder was considered to be the most heinous of crimes, cold-blooded, premeditated murder. And it's been considered in a very poor light for quite some time. So why is it now? Well, no, that's okay to murder someone. I mean, I don't agree with that person. It's okay to kill them. I mean, what? How did it come to this? And that's the purpose, or that's the, if you like, the impetus for this genesis for this essay. Now, in the thumbnail, notice two sort of mutilated bodies. That's Benito Mussolini, the Italian. He's sort of described as the fascist dictator. To say he's a dictator is probably pushing it a bit. Fascist. Mussolini practiced quite an early version of fascism, and the German version was really in many ways quite different. But nonetheless, in 1943, I think it was, Mussolini and the lady next to him, his girlfriend, were executed by a street mob, mostly communist goons, but was executed by a street mob, as was his girlfriend. They decided they'd just mutilate the bodies and hang them up and mutilate them a bit more, and that was. Now, whatever you might think about Mussolini, should he have been brought to trial, and the extent of his crimes and those complicit could have been examined, and then I think that would have been preferable. But the idea of the street mob killing someone, now, I've got a problem with it. I don't think that's the right way to go, because once you get to that sort of anarchic type way of dealing with things, then the problems multiply, I think, rather than diminish. Now, you look at, say, somewhere in more modern times, Tunisia, where or Libya rather, with the murder of Colonel Gaddafi on the street. He was the leader, or the dictator, if you want to call that, in Libya, and he kept the peace, and he kept the roving mobs. He kept the NGOs out that wanted to traffic large numbers of people into Europe and around. He kept the slave trade away. So, for whatever shortcomings he had, he certainly did that. Now, he wanted to create like a pan-Arab type thing. I don't know if he could have pulled it off, but nonetheless, he was looking at that. So in the end, he was just murdered, beaten to death on the street. And again, this sort of arbitrary, he's got, his views don't fit in with the globalist sort of project. So what we'll do, we'll just arrange his killing. Now, Libya was destabilized to a point where it's never recovered. So whatever benefit somebody may think was from killing Gaddafi and dismantling his administration, whatever the benefit may have been, it certainly has been lost. The disbenefit vastly outweigh any benefit in the guy who was murdered on the street. Now, when you get ideological fanatics that are pursuing a course of action that it's not organic, it hasn't developed over time, it hasn't been brought on by some sort of necessity or anything like that. Instead, it's an ideological position. And once you go down an ideological path with ideological goals, then it's impossible to take into account the damage that the pursuit of that goal causes, the collateral damage. And again, with any ideological fanatic, the view is that those who don't agree with you, those who maybe have alternative points of view, it's quite acceptable for them to die, to be murdered, starved to death, shot to death, taken out back and hung, or whatever. It's quite acceptable. It is very acceptable. They do not hold you. You have your ideological position. They do not share that. They do not have the same view. It's okay to kill them. Really, it is. And it doesn't matter if you have to kill the odd one or two here or there, thousands, tens of thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. It doesn't matter. The ideological goal itself is the ultimate, if you like, the idyllic, the utopian endpoint, and therefore any. Now, when we come to looking at Charlie Kirk, why do so many people celebrate it and rejoice over it? Because it doesn't seem to make any sense. Isn't murder wrong? They don't seem to think so. He didn't hold the same views as me, therefore his murder is acceptable. I mean, like, wow, I mean, the moral compass required to make that jump is astonishing. Isn't murder wrong? And not really, because the guy disagrees with me. Now they go on to, and I've looked at some of the videos. They're going to say, well, it's okay to kill him because he's a Nazi. Well, what's the benchmark and definition of Nazi? Well, he spread hate against marginalized peoples. Now that's getting closer now. We're getting close to the thing, marginalized people. So what do they mean by that? A marginalized person. So someone who has limited social power, or according to their ideology, has little or no social power, and therefore to speak, to put forward views that either deny them or prevent their victim status, and the celebratory nature of their victim status. That is a hate crime. That's hate speech. Well, who does hate speech? Nazis do hate speech. And so through very simple, infantile, juvenile sort of sequences of logic, Nazis do hate speech. What is hate speech? Hate speech is the speaking ill of marginalized groups. Like Charlie Kirk didn't believe in, transgender surgery or something, those sort of things. A man can't be a woman. And well, those people are marginalized. He spoke ill of marginalized people. Therefore, he was engaging in hate speech, as the logic goes. If he's engaging in hate speech, he's therefore a Nazi. It is therefore okay to kill him. There we go. Got the logic loop all tied up. And this is pretty much how it's gone. I would say that's quite clearly how it's gone. So there are people, many of them, running around. So we did hate speech. Well, what was the hate speech? Well, he said men can't be women. Fuck me, is that hate speech? And that's a statement of fact, isn't it? No, because the people he's talking about have, in ideological terms, they have no social power. Because they have no such power, they are a victim group. And because you speak, you marginalize or speak ill of or do not talk up the victim group, then it is hate speech, therefore Nazi, therefore murder, and so on. So that's the goal. So they celebrate his death because of that. Now, was he, talking oppression to marginalized groups? Well, firstly, they're marginalized on ideological lines. If someone chooses to go into the trans loop, then this pain they're suffering is largely self-inflicted. Should a whole society, the other 99.9%, should they all sort of tiptoe on eggshells around that one person's, self-inflicted discomfort? Well, no, of course not. But these groups believe, well, you should, because you have to show respect for a victim group, because ideologically we say they're a victim group, and therefore, and their logic goes along those lines. Now, killing people because you don't agree with them is obviously still murder. Those who aid and abet the murder, again, they've committed a criminal act. To what extent do we then criminalise speech? Because the people that advocate murder for folks they don't agree with, they have criminalised speech. If Charlie, or anyone for that matter, if Charlie Kirk says, well, men can't be women, they can ideologically determine that as, well, you're an enemy of equality, you're an enemy of equity, you're an enemy of love and caring for marginalized people, therefore you must be a Nazi. But they're missing the essential point of, where is the, to what extent do these people take responsibility for their own decisions? Now, the people that are celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk aren't people that they look like you'd imagine that they'd look, and they're not people who are really prepared to take personal responsibility for their own life decisions and their ability to revel in victimhood and to be a protected class of, I can call you a Nazi anytime I want, but you say one word negative about me, then we can kill you. We can debank you. We can deplatform you. We can make sure that you don't have a job, or these sort of. So all the power rests with them on the basis, well, I have no social power, and you do have social power, which gives me the right to therefore kill you. Excuse me. How did this attitude get into the now, again, it's an ideological attitude. If we go back to, say, the Soviet Union or any communist country, given that the government was imposed and ideological, so the people didn't choose it, communism didn't develop as a government through organic trial and error, over centuries, and this sort of, it didn't develop that way. Therefore, it's typically imposed at the point of a gun. And once the communism is put in place, the determination is, well, we've already got the framework for utopia. If utopia doesn't appear, it's because we have enemies of the people, counter-revolutionaries. And those people, the ones that don't share the views, it's okay if we kill them. It's okay if we arbitrarily imprison them. It's okay if we drag them through kangaroo courts and throw them in prison, like January 6th. That was just a kangaroo court from beginning to end. People who were just somewhere in the vicinity were being thrown in the slammer, for goodness sake, by ideological judges, ideological prosecutors, and so on. And increasingly, determinations about how we run society in the West, how it's administered, who gets what rewards, who gets what benefits, who gets what privileges, and your legal rights. All this thing is being determined. All these things are being determined ideologically, and that's increasingly so. So if you hold the wrong view, it's okay to murder you, and if you hold the wrong view, it's okay to suspend your legal rights. And this is being determined on the basis of the arbitrage around alleged social power itself, ideologically. So when we go through all this, we can see that, whether it's through the universities or the march of the institutions, that this has crept in gradually. And you can even see it in court cases that in the superior courts. We're not talking the court of petty sessions where neighbours are suing each other over, you cut down my roses or something. It's not that. We're talking the serious stuff where people go to prison for it. That murder, armed robbery, assault, brutal assault involving people going to, lengthy hospital stays and problems they have for life with their health after the beating and so on. Those cases are now the rarer cases in the courts. They used to be the nearly all the cases were that. Now they're not. Now the cases are to do with gender warfare, technical rape, where she's agreed and they've all they've got together and copulated and so on, but after the fact she said, well, actually I had half a glass of wine over the limit, therefore I didn't actually technically give consent. Now those technical rapes where it's consensual, but it's argued, well, she couldn't give consent because the wine and that sort of thing. That's still getting men 2, 3, 4 years in prison for that. And also, the cases where the transgender black lesbian or something wasn't granted access to some building or club or something, some social event or whatever, and is able to somehow get millions of dollars in funding to take the matter to court. So there's a vast web of NGOs and some of it government funded through legal aid, the activists in legal aid, to bring these matters to court for the purposes, not that someone's actually suffered, but for the premeditated purpose of social engineering. So, for example, the trans person goes into a suburban, pub bar, suburban bar somewhere, and where it's an all-male type thing, pretty sort of homespun folksy, and they'll go in a man will go in dressed in bright and vivid girly type colours, and then try and use the women's bathroom with making the biggest fuss, trying to attract as much attention as they can. And if the employees say, no, you're a man, you can't use that, but lawsuit, incoming lawsuit, and where does this person find the money to do this? Now, they somehow get a very sympathetic prosecutor, an incredibly sympathetic judge, and they win the case. And the bar has to make a big payout, or make a grovelling apology and a payout, or maybe even if the staff got a bit rough, there's a bit of pushing and shoving and jostling, maybe someone even goes to prison for assault, for goodness sakes. But that's all a premeditated, prearranged, stage-managed event. And with NGOs and various organisations premeditating, pre-planning, pre-organising. Now, to me, that's the same as the Charlie Kirk assassination. The whole thing was pre-planned around an activist group where the resources, the planning, the infrastructure was all provided. And as far as I'm concerned, all these people are criminally involved in this case to pervert the course of justice, or in the case of Charlie Kirk, to plot, to arrange an assassination. But the methodology, the raison d'etre is the same. And this is something I think we need to realise is all around us, and something we need to stop and make sure it is ruthlessly defunded. You've been a Tassos today, your Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.